My parents abandoned me to start over with my sister. 10 years later, after living their dream life, they asked me for money. I blocked them forever. Imagine this. You're just 13, playing with your action figures, and your parents call you downstairs with that weird, too calm voice. You think you're in trouble for leaving milk out. But instead they drop a bombshell. We can't afford to care for you anymore. Then, 10 years later, after living their dream life without you, they have the audacity to ask you for money. Yeah, that happened. And let me tell you, I blocked them forever. My name is Ethan, and I'm 25 now, but this story really began when I was 13. Back then, I thought my family was pretty normal. We weren't rich, but we had a nice house, good clothes, everything seemed fine. My parents, Marianne and Daniel, they acted like nothing was wrong, until it all came crashing down. Then there was my sister, Claire. She was the golden kid, you know? Teachers adored her, my parents gushed about her. If she sneezed, it was a masterpiece. Me, I was just Ethan. Not a bad kid, but no matter what I did, I felt like background noise. Claire's drawings got prime fridge space. My accomplishments got a pat on the back and a mumbled, "That's nice, Ethan." And honestly, I didn't resent Claire for it. It wasn't her fault they treated her like a prize, and me like I didn't matter. But it made me feel completely insignificant. The day everything changed started like any other. I was in my room, still clinging to my action figures, when Marianne called me down. I walked into the living room, and Daniel and Marianne were on the couch, looking way too serious to be talking about milk. Daniel motioned to a chair and said, "Sit down, Ethan." His voice was tight, like a business meeting. Marianne tried to look empathetic, but something was just off. She took a long breath and said, "Ethan, we need to talk about something important." My first thought was, oh no, someone died. But then Daniel added, "We've had some financial difficulties, and we can't afford to care for you anymore." I thought I misheard him. "What do you mean you can't afford to take care of me? Am I some kind of subscription you're canceling?" I just stared. Marianne rushed on. "It's not your fault, sweetheart. We've been grappling with this for a long time, and we had to make a difficult decision." A difficult decision? They made it sound like they were choosing a cable package, not abandoning their child. I finally found my voice. "What do you mean?" I asked, desperate. Marianne said they'd found a foster home for me. "Just temporary," she kept repeating, as if that would make it better. "Why can't Claire go to a foster home?" I blurted out. Marianne's face went cold for a second. "Claire's in school, Ethan. She requires stability." Stability? Like I didn't. Daniel cut me off before I could say more. "This isn't about picking one of you. It's about what makes the most sense right now." I started weeping, and I mean weeping. Full on, snotty, 13-year-old crying. How else do you respond when your parents tell you they're giving up on you? Marianne tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. "Why are you doing this?" I kept asking, but all they did was repeat those scripted lines about difficult decisions and financial troubles. The next day, they packed a small suitcase for me. The drive to the foster home was silent. Not a peaceful silence, but one thick with tension. I kept staring at them, expecting one of them to crack, to look back and say, "This is a mistake. You're coming home." But they didn't. When we arrived, I waited in the car, clinging to that sliver of hope. Daniel turned and whispered, "Come on, Ethan, let's get this over with." Like I was a chore. I got out, carrying the duffel bag they'd prepared. The foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, were at the door. They seemed nice, but I barely registered them. All I could see was my parents, ready to abandon me. Marianne knelt. "We love you, Ethan. This isn't goodbye forever. Just give it some time, okay?" She kissed my forehead, but it felt like a stamp or return label. Daniel shook my hand. A handshake, not an embrace. Then they were gone. I stood on the porch, watching their car disappear, my chest feeling heavier by the second. They'll come back, I thought. They have to come back. But they didn't. That night, I replayed everything. What did I do wrong? Was I not good enough? Why Claire and not me? Those questions haunted me for months. All I had was their promise that this was temporary. And deep down, I knew I'd never see them again. Looking back, that was the moment everything changed. It wasn't just that they left, it was the way they left. Like I was a burden they were relieved to be rid of. But at 13, I didn't have the words for that. I just knew I was alone. Over the next few days, the Thompsons tried their best. Mrs. Thompson made pancakes every morning. They were kind, but I wasn't ready to trust anyone. I clung to temporary. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Not a single word from them. It hit me hardest when I went back to school. Kids asked why I was new where I was from. I couldn't explain the truth. So I made up vague answers. Oh, my parents are working in another state. Even saying it tasted bitter. One afternoon, avoiding homework, I made the mistake of looking them up online. I don't know what I expected. Maybe just a sign they remembered me. What I found knocked the wind out of me. There they were, smiling on a beach, the ocean behind them. Finally living our dream life, the caption read. Happier than I'd ever seen them. My stomach churned. Picture after picture of tropical vacations, fancy dinners, and of course Claire. Front and center. Our amazing daughter, the captions read. It was like I didn't exist. The more I scrolled, the angrier I got. They told me they couldn't afford me. But here they were, living like influencers. And Claire, who wasn't in foster care like me, smiling for the camera as if everything was perfect. My head was spinning. They hadn't just abandoned me. They'd erased me. But then something else caught my eye. They had a whole travel blog detailing their journey to freedom. They even wrote about how letting go of material possessions, aka me, had given them clarity. I scrolled to the comments. One stood out. Must be nice running away and leaving everything behind. Hope it doesn't catch up to you. And another. Guess skipping town was worth it after all. My chest tightened. What did that mean? Were they talking about me or something else entirely? I clicked the accounts private. Just blank gray circles. Daniel and Marianne weren't strangers to lying. They'd told me they couldn't afford me, which was clearly a lie. Was there more? I closed my laptop, hands shaking. It wasn't just the lies. It was their lack of guilt. They were living their best lives, and I was just trying to figure out how to live without them. That night, the Thompsons noticed. You okay, Ethan? Mr. Thompson asked. Yeah, I mumbled. But Mrs. Thompson wasn't letting it go. You don't have to tell us if you're not ready. But if something's bothering you, we're here, she said gently. I looked at them. These people who barely knew me, but seemed to care more than my own parents ever did. And for some reason I broke. I told them everything. The blog, the pictures, the captions. I expected them to tell me to stop looking, or that it didn't matter. They didn't. Mrs. Thompson just listened. Her eyes full of that quiet sympathy I was still getting used to. Mr. Thompson, though, looked furious. You have every right to be angry, he said. What they did to you, that's not on you. That's on them. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise. It wasn't a big speech, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. For the first time, someone was telling me it wasn't my fault. Over the next few weeks, I started to adjust. The Thompsons weren't perfect, but they were consistent. They asked about my day, helped with homework, encouraged me. I even started opening up at school, joining clubs, making friends. But my resentment towards my parents, it grew stronger. I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let their decision define me. So I joined the debate team. Figured I was already used to arguing. Thanks to Daniel and Marianne. Might as well put it to use. Turns out I was pretty good. Mr. Thompson hinted I might enjoy having some spending money, so I got a part-time job at a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but I loved being surrounded by books, and it gave me a taste of independence. My friend, Lucas, just nodded when I told him about my parents. That's messed up, man. Wanna play video games? He just got it. Every paycheck felt like a step toward a future that was mine and mine alone. One afternoon I came home and the house was too quiet. Usually Mrs. Thompson was humming in the kitchen, Mr. Thompson tinkering in the garage. But I heard hushed voices from the dining room. I paused in the hallway just out of sight. Should we tell him? Mrs. Thompson asked, low and uncertain. He has a right to know, Mr. Thompson responded. If it's about him, we can't keep it a secret. It'll just upset him. He's doing so well right now, she argued. I took a step closer, my heart pounding. What were they talking about? We should at least wait until we know more, Mrs. Thompson continued. This letter doesn't explain much. It could be nothing. I leaned against the wall. A letter. About me. Before I could figure out how to ask without sounding like a spy, Mr. Thompson sighed. Fine, we'll wait. But if they contact us again, we have to come clean. I heard footsteps, so I ducked into the kitchen, pretending I'd just walked in. Mrs. Thompson smiled when she saw me, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Later that night, everyone asleep, I snuck into the dining room. On the stack of mail, an envelope with my name. I feared picking it up. The return address was from a legal office. My stomach turned. I opened it, scanning the first few lines. To whom it may concern, this is a notice regarding unresolved debts associated with Daniel and Marianne. As Ethan's listed guardians, we request any relevant documentation regarding the family's financial situation. I stopped reading, hands shaking. Debts? Was this what Daniel and Marianne had been running from? Had they dumped me not because they couldn't afford me, but because they couldn't face their own mistakes? I stuffed the letter back, put it on the stack. My mind was racing. Daniel and Marianne had been lying about more than just their finances. By 17, things were clicking. School, job, extracurriculars, it was paying off. My grades were solid. Debate coach said I had a good shot at a scholarship. That was the first time I imagined a future without my parents, without their baggage. It felt good, liberating. Then the scholarship became real. I applied on a whim, never thinking I'd get it. When I opened that envelope and saw full ride, I couldn't believe it. I ran downstairs. The Thompsons were glowing with pride. Mrs. Thompson hugged me tight. Mr. Thompson kept saying, I knew it. I knew you could do it. That night, I shared the news on social media. I wasn't big on personal posts, but this felt like a moment to celebrate. I wrote something short and sweet about hard work paying off. Comments poured in from friends, teachers, classmates. But one made my stomach drop. We're so proud of you, Ethan. Let's reconnect soon. After everything, I was proud of myself. I stared at the comment. The audacity. It wasn't just that they commented, it was how casual it was, like we were distant relatives, not parents who abandoned their son. I didn't respond. What could I say? Instead, I deleted the comment and blocked them both. I didn't need their approval or their guilt trips. The scholarship gave me a new purpose. I dove even harder into my studies, determined to prove to myself, and maybe to them, that I could succeed without their help. Mr. Thompson started teaching me financial literacy. It wasn't glamorous, but it was practical. It gave me a sense of control I'd never had. I even started tutoring younger students. It felt good to help kids who were struggling, especially knowing what it was like to feel left behind. During one session, Lucas asked, "What's your ultimate goal? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" I thought for a second. I just want to be stable. Have my own place, my own life. Not feel like I'm relying on anyone else. That's solid, he grinned. But don't forget to have some fun along the way. His words stuck with me. I'd been so focused on proving myself, I hadn't left room for anything else. So, I started saying yes to things I'd normally avoid. Game nights, spontaneous road trips, lazy Sundays at the park. It reminded me that life wasn't just grind. By the end of that year, I felt like a different person. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The Thompsons were my rock. Lucas was like a brother. I was finally on my own path. My parents' absence still hurt sometimes, but it didn't define me. It inspired me. Then came graduation day, the culmination of everything. I'd stand in front of everyone who supported me and say, "I made it." The weeks leading up were a blur. The Thompsons were buzzing, planning a celebration. Even Lucas was excited. I remember the morning like yesterday. My mind raced, thinking about everything it took to get there. From being left on their porch to all those nights studying. Mrs. Thompson had ironed my gown, left it on my door with a note. "So proud of you, Ethan." I smiled. When my name was called, I walked across that stage, and for a brief moment, time froze. The Thompsons weren't just foster parents. They were my true family. After the ceremony, we gathered for pictures. The Thompsons beamed. Lucas made dumb jokes about my diploma being in crayon. Claire had even shown up, which was a surprise, as she usually kept to herself. My world felt perfect, until I saw Daniel and Marianne. At the edge of the crowd. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. I hadn't seen them in years. I hadn't invited them. But there they were, dressed like they'd just stepped off a cruise ship, scanning the crowd. I tried to ignore them, hoping they'd leave. But Daniel caught my eye. Before I could turn away, he started walking toward me, Marianne in tow. My chest tightened, their faces plastered with fake smiles. "Ethan!" Marianne chirped, her voice way too chipper. "You look so grown up." Daniel clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. "We're so proud of you, son. This is such a big day for all of us." I almost laughed at the audacity. I just stared at them, unsure if I should scream, cry, or walk away. The Thompsons and Lucas stood nearby, clearly perplexed but unwilling to intervene. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice steady despite my shaking hands. "We came to celebrate with you," Daniel said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "We've made mistakes, Ethan. But we always wanted the best for you," Marianne chimed in, her voice dripping with faux sincerity. "We've missed you so much. We thought this would be the perfect time to reconnect as a family." "You don't get to call yourselves my family," I said. "You abandoned me. You left me with strangers and didn't even bother to check if I was okay. And now you want to show up as if none of that happened." Marianne's smile faltered. Daniel's face reddened. "That's not fair, Ethan," Daniel tried to say, keeping his voice calm. "We did what we thought was best for everyone. Best for everyone." I shot back. "You mean best for you? Don't stand here and act like you did this for me. You were living your dream life while I was trying to figure out how to survive without you." By now, people were noticing. The Thompsons stepped closer, their faces a mix of concern and anger. But then, Claire surprised everyone. She walked right up to Daniel and Marianne. "You don't get to ruin this for him," she said, her voice firm. "You've done enough." It was the first time I'd ever seen her stand up to them, and I couldn't have been more proud. Daniel tried to argue, but Marianne tugged his arm, whispering something about causing a scene. They both looked at me one last time, a mix of frustration and pity, before turning and walking away. The Thompsons immediately enveloped me in a hug, reminding me that today was about my accomplishments, not their drama. Lucas handed me a tissue, muttering something about charging them for emotional damages, which actually made me laugh. The rest of the day was a blur. We went back to the Thompsons, their backyard decorated. For a few hours, I forgot about Daniel and Marianne, just enjoyed being with the people who truly mattered. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat on the porch with Claire. She looked at me and said, "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't see it before, but you were right. They manipulated us. They only care about themselves." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We sat in silence for a while, but I felt like Claire and I were finally on the same page. That was enough. That day wasn't just about graduation. It was about finally standing up for myself, cutting ties with the people who tried to drag me down. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I knew my parents weren't done, though. Their sudden reappearance, their insistence on coming back into my life, made me feel something was off. And I couldn't have been more right. 10 days after graduation, I got an email from Marianne. I initially thought it might be an apology, but deep down I knew better. It was long, full of half-truths and excuses. She wrote about how difficult things had been for them, how they'd made mistakes, but always had my best interests at heart. Then she hit me with it. "We hope we can move past this and reconnect as a family. You're doing so well, and we're proud of you. Maybe you could help us out during this tough time." I didn't respond. I blocked their email address, but the anger lingered like an unwelcome guest. They had the audacity to ask for my help after everything. Claire, who was keeping an eye on them out of morbid curiosity, told me about their antics. They'd blown all their resources trying to keep up the dream life illusion. The travel blog had failed. Nothing but debt and terrible credit. They'd sold most of their belongings and were couch surfing with distant relatives who, according to Claire, were losing patience. "They're a mess," Claire said one night on the phone. "But they're still blaming you for everything. They think if you just forgive them, everything will magically fix itself." Forgive them for what? Making me homeless at 13. I snapped, the bitterness sharp in my voice. Claire sighed. "I'm not saying they're right, Ethan. Just telling you what they're saying. Their downfall wasn't something I celebrated, but I couldn't say I felt bad for them either. They made their choices and now they were dealing with the consequences. Meanwhile, my life was moving on. One afternoon, a notification on my phone left me speechless. Daniel and Marian had found me on LinkedIn and left a comment on a post about my upcoming scholarship. "We're so proud of you, Ethan. Let's catch up soon." It was almost identical to the graduation comment. I had no idea they even knew how LinkedIn worked. I blocked them right away, but it wasn't enough. They started contacting people in my network, coworkers, instructors, even the Thompsons. The messages were all the same, a combination of guilt-tripping and plain falsehoods about how I'd abandoned them. One of those messages reached my employer at the bookstore. She pulled me aside one day. "Look, I don't want to pry," she said, "but someone claiming to be your parents sent us an email. It was weird." I was mortified. "I'm so sorry," I said. "They're not really part of my life. I'll handle it." To her credit, she just nodded. "Well, if they bother us again, let me know. We've got your back." That was a relief, but it also made me realize how far they were willing to go. It wasn't enough to infiltrate my personal life. They were trying to sabotage my professional one. Around this time, Claire stepped in. She posted a public statement on her social media, calling them out. She didn't hold back, detailing how they'd abandoned both of us and refused to take responsibility. "Ethan and I have worked hard to rebuild our lives without their support," she wrote, "and we don't owe them anything." Her post went viral. Thousands of people commented, showing support. It was validating to see so many strangers siding with us, but it also escalated the situation. Daniel and Marianne lashed out with their own dramatic rants about how we were ungrateful, how they'd sacrificed so much. Their posts were full of half-truths and outright lies. But the more they talked, the more people saw through them. Then Claire called me, her voice unusually excited. "You remember that old storage unit they had?" she asked. "Turns out they stopped paying for it, and the landlord let me grab a few things before clearing it out." An hour later, she was at my place with a battered cardboard box. "You need to see this," she said. Inside, I found a folder stuffed with paperwork. Unpaid bills, foreclosure notices, letters from collections agencies. As I flipped through them, my stomach sank. They were living way beyond their means, Claire said bitterly. Failed businesses, maxed out credit cards. Looks like they ran instead of facing it. Near the bottom, a letter from their lawyer caught my eye. It mentioned restructuring finances and reducing dependents to streamline expenses. My name was right there, listed like a liability. I slammed the folder shut, my hand shaking. "They didn't leave because they couldn't afford me," I said quietly. They left because it was easier than cleaning up their mess. Claire paused, then said, "I thought you deserved to know." "Thanks," I muttered. After she left, I stared at the folder, torn between burning it and keeping it. I kept it, not for them, but for myself. By the time I started college, their reputation was in shambles. People were reporting their crowdfunding campaigns as fraudulent. Even the relatives they'd been staying with had kicked them out. Claire reported they were still clinging to the idea that I owed them something. But I was thriving. College was everything I'd hoped for. I was determined to make the most of my scholarship. I even started a small side hustle, teaching financial literacy workshops on campus. It felt good to give back, especially after all Mr. Thompson had taught me. One day in my third semester, Claire called again. "You're not going to believe this," she said, frustration and disbelief warring in her tone. "They showed up at my apartment." "What?" I asked, my chest tightening. "They were crying, Ethan, begging me to convince you to talk to them. They said they're desperate." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "What did you say?" "I told them to leave. I said if they showed up again, I'd call the police." I didn't know whether to be angry or relieved. Part of me hated that they were still trying to drag Claire into their mess, but I was so proud of her for standing her ground. She'd come a long way. I didn't owe them my forgiveness, my money, or my time. What I owed was to myself, to continue building the life I desired, free of their influence. But they weren't the type to let go, especially if they thought there was something in it for them. It started with the calls. Random numbers, all hours. I usually ignored them. But one day, I made the mistake of answering. It was my Aunt Diane, a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. She didn't waste any time. "Ethan, what is wrong with you?" she snapped, before I could even say hello. "Excuse me," I said, completely taken aback. "Your parents are struggling, living in their car, and you're just ignoring them like they don't exist. They're your family, Ethan. You owe them at least a little kindness." I bit back the urge to laugh. Kindness? Did they show me kindness when they dropped me off at a foster home and never looked back? Did they show me kindness when they abandoned me at 13? Diane huffed, clearly not expecting pushback. They were doing what they thought was best. "People make mistakes, Ethan. You're being heartless." I hung up. I wasn't going to waste my energy justifying myself to someone who clearly had no idea what I'd been through, or worse, didn't care. Over the next few weeks, similar calls came in from distant cousins. It was the same script every time. I was the ungrateful son, the selfish one who couldn't forgive his poor parents. What none of them seemed to understand was that Daniel and Marianne weren't just bad parents. They were toxic, manipulative, and completely unwilling to accept responsibility. Helping them would only drag me back into the mess I'd worked so hard to get out of. When the phone calls didn't work, Daniel and Marianne took things to the next level. One day, I received an email from a lawyer representing them. Subject line, "Notice of intent to pursue financial support." I opened it, skimming the legal jargon. It boiled down to this. They were suing me for financial abandonment. According to the email, they believed I was obligated to support them now that I was successful. It was laughable. First, I wasn't a millionaire. Sure, I was doing well, but I was still early in my career. Second, I'd been in foster care. Legally, I owed them nothing. I forwarded the email to a lawyer the Thompsons had connected me with. She assured me it was an empty threat. "They don't have a case," she said. "They're trying to scare you into giving them money. Don't engage." It was good advice, but it still left a bad taste. The idea that they could twist the story, make me the bad guy after everything they'd done, felt like salt in the wound. Rather than stew over it, I poured my energy into my work. My financial literacy workshops, which started as a side hustle, had grown into a full-fledged organization, helping young adults across the country manage their money and build their futures. I had collaborated with nonprofits, schools, even some well-known companies. Then I received an email from a producer who'd heard my story through one of my nonprofit partners. They wanted to feature me in a series about resilience. I was hesitant at first, but after discussing it with the Thompsons and Claire, I decided to go for it. If sharing my story could make even one foster child feel less alone, it would be worth it. The filming process was surreal. They asked if I wanted to include anything about Daniel and Marianne. I thought about it for a long time. I decided to mention them briefly, not to shame them, but to provide context for my journey. They made their choices, I said during one interview, and those choices shaped me in ways I never expected. But they don't define me. My life now, the family I've built, the work I do, that's what matters. But during one of the filming breaks, the producer pulled me aside, looking uneasy. "Hey, Ethan," she began, "we found something during our research. It's about your parents. Are you okay hearing it?" I arched an eyebrow. At this point, I'm not sure anything could surprise me. "Go ahead." She took a deep breath. It turns out they were evicted after defaulting on several loans. There's also a history of unpaid bills, and this is where it gets messy, potential fraud accusations. It looks like they skipped town to avoid legal trouble. I stared at her. Fraud accusations? The words felt heavy, sinking in slow motion. She nodded. It wasn't major, at least not on the surface, but there's a pattern. Failed business ventures, sketchy credit card activity, attempts to secure loans they couldn't repay. They left a lot of people hanging. The anger I thought I'd buried flared up again. They weren't just selfish. They were actively screwing people over, then fleeing when it caught up with them. The producer gave me a sympathetic smile. "It seems that way. I thought you should know in case it comes up later." I nodded, my head whirling. Their lies had always felt personal, like they were all about me. But knowing they'd left a trail of damage behind them made it so much worse. When the documentary premiered, people who'd grown up in similar situations flooded in to thank me. Some said it gave them hope. Everything about my parents confirmed my suspicion. They abandoned me because it was convenient, a way to cut their losses and start over. Daniel and Marianne tried to use the documentary to their advantage, posting long, dramatic rants on social media about how I'd painted them as villains, how they were the true victims. But it didn't work. In fact, it backfired. People who saw the documentary started calling them out, pointing out the holes in their stories, questioning their motives. Their attempts to regain sympathy only solidified their reputation as manipulative and selfish. In the meantime, I bought my first home, a cozy place in a quiet neighborhood where I could finally feel like I belonged. I invited the Thompsons and Claire over for a housewarming dinner. We spent the night laughing, eating too much, reminiscing about how far we'd come. Claire was thriving too, having graduated college and started her own career, free of their shadow. To be honest, I don't regret my decisions. At the end of the day, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who helps you become the best version of yourself. It wasn't easy to let go of Daniel and Marianne, but it was necessary. My success came from the Thompsons, from Claire, and from the family I built. And the family I picked? They exceeded all my expectations.